I look forward to hearing what others make of this. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Jaap, for an interesting, provocative start to our conversation. I realize that I'm sitting at my colleague Shingai's machine. So those who don't know me probably don't know that my name is Janine Rauch and I'm the director of the Technical Assistance Facility. I should have explained that at the outset. I'm going to hand over now. Sorry, Jaap, I just also want to draw your attention to two questions in the chat from Tess, who's a member of the Sofokama project consortium, and maybe you can look at those and be prepared to talk to them after the colleagues from the NGO projects talk. I am going to invite, we've got 3 colleagues from 3 of the projects funded by the EU's Enhancing Accountability Programme. And I'm going to invite Girish, who is the project manager of the Compact project at which is a collaboration between PARI, Integrity Action, and SALGA, the Local Government Association. Girish Daya is the project manager of that project, and that's working in a number of municipalities all over the country. So I'm going to ask him to be the first civil society person to respond to Jaap's input, and I'm going to be stricter on time with you, Girish, just be warned. Thank you. Go for it.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Janine, and welcome everybody to this chat. Yeah, thank you very much. The provocations are really up there and demanding, but somehow also there is other aspects to look at in terms of an ideal. If you allow me, I'm going to share a presentation that I prepared very briefly. Janine, I hope you don't mind. And yeah, I trust everyone could see this. So yeah, we think here, rethinking how municipalities can appoint staff. My just a bit of background. I'm over 20 years in local government space and witnessed a lot of things. Here in Compact, that too, we work with 12 municipalities, and here too, similar issues are coming up in terms of these capabilities, I would say, in the appointment not only of municipal staff and this, I mean, sorry, municipal senior staff, you know, and this is my thoughts here very briefly, and to some extent contributing to the provocations that Professor Jaap makes. Career pathing more as an ideal, you know, that qualifications and experience most critical to take the steps that we need. We start off, especially in local government, we start off with a acting director or a clerical position, and each individual has an ambition to climb, and that recognition of ambition is sometimes not there, sometimes it is there. And in the encouragement of the municipality in its HR environment for this person to get to the top is important, and therefore the absence of a PMS in an organization is also very critical. An ideal is also apolitical. I think we've Jaap mentioned this in pillars 1 and 5. I think that we also understand that there's a degree of autonomy in municipalities, but that should not by any means interfere with a career pathing environment. What should be the approach then, an ideal approach for persons entering local government, and that is to climb that ladder step by step and then position by position. And so you cannot become a MM overnight. You needed to know the ropes in order to get to, or for that matter, CFO. Many in my experience, CFOs are unexperienced. Look, if within that constraint of the area, there is not a suitable candidate, and obviously we go out and look for it. But there's certain ethical codes and conducts that one should apply in an appointment of these senior staff at the municipality. I've known in some cases there was an appointment of a 25-year-old accountant as a CFO, and not even a true qualification, and many of the appointments are by influence of the mayor or the MM or whatever senior members are there. Then an ideal would be for the municipality also to ensure that they improve qualification experience in order to get to apply a career pathing to some extent. Very quickly, some of the advantages.
1 minute, Girish.
Thank you. Some of the advantages of career pathing is consistency in shaping the future, because there are ideals in terms of the institution moving to a certain place, and this impacts on your professional people building and encouraging planning ethics. And I think a planning ethic is so relevant at local government, especially for service delivery. Here again, an approach allows a skill or skills to develop systemically, and this is what we look at, apply, and then apply some disciplinary measures, especially on past performance. Thank you. Sorry.
Okay. Thank you very much for those thoughts on how municipalities might move past the current situation. I'm going to have to move to the next input, which is from, I'm going to ask Jay from the Action for Accountability project to speak from their experience. The Action for Accountability is similar in age and experience to the Compact project that Girish was speaking for. Jay is Jay Cruiser from PSAM, which is one of the organizations that form part of the Action for Accountability consortium. Jay, are you ready? The Action for Accountability project is a consortium between PSAM, which is the Public Service Accountability Monitor at Roads, the Kathrada Foundation, and Accountability Lab South Africa. Welcome, Jay. You've got 5 or 6 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you, Janine. Let me just share my screen. All right. Are you seeing the presentation there, Janine?
Not yet, no.
Okay. Let's just get out here then. No. Apologies. All right. So,
We can see it, Jay.
can you see it? Right.
Yes.
Thank you for your patience. Okay, so yeah, I'm speaking on behalf of the Action for Accountability project that's co-funded by the European Union, and we're running a project across 4 sites in Johannesburg and Grahamstown, and wanted to share some of our suggestions. So a quick overview, I'll give you a framing, a context, and then we'll look at some of the dispositional variables affecting municipal staff, some of the situational variables, and then two slides on consultants and the use and abuse thereof by municipalities, and then what can be done. So just by way of a background, Auditor General reports looking at local government point to regression. So these are some of the key findings. So poor financial skills, lack of accountability, instabilities in leadership, the challenges of the irregular expenditure, a culture of non-performance generally, and of course non-adherence to laws. 2022 State of Local Government report identified 66 dysfunctional municipalities, 107 of which are at medium risk, and only 30 municipalities are regarded as stable. So that's a rather depressing state of play across the country. I first wanted to just touch on some of the dispositional variables that, and this applies not just to municipalities, applies to governments, it will apply to people in the workplaces generally, in the commercial or in the private sector. So what is your disposition? Dictionaries define it as a person's inherent qualities of mind and character, or their dominant qualities or qualities distinguishing a person or group. And so, really we've got to delve into the state of mind of public servants, and the positions that they adopt when they work in municipalities. And they are often challenged by issues of integrity, values, morality, honesty, issues of responsibility, challenges of their conscience. When one looks at issues of fraud, there are perceived opportunities created by, say, weak internal controls or ineffective monitoring. The Auditor General often identifies that as a significant challenge in areas of government. And then you've got pressures that employees are under. There may be family pressures, there may be pressures from a financial perspective, there may be concerns with not receiving adequate remuneration or being overlooked for promotion. And then, of course, the rationalization factor. I'll pay it back, I deserve this, it's for a good purpose. And then we look at situational variables in municipality. So is there a strong work ethic in a municipality? Does the municipality value accountability? Is there a culture of consequence management? And do municipalities actively advance the values in the constitution? And we have data and evidence coming out of Auditor General's reports and evaluations by the Public Service Commission, looking at the Human Rights Commission's investigations as well, and of course the Public Protector's investigations into maladministration. And these play a part in whether staff elect to or are positioned to take action that is, rights-based. Is it honest? Is it a decision that is informed by the realities on the ground? Or a person may be well positioned to want to do the right thing, but the environment really pushes against them. And so those are factors that need to be taken into account. I'd like to turn quickly then to consultants, and these are some of the findings, the latest findings coming from the Auditor General's office. And there's a quote there which notes how we've ballooned in terms of the use of consultants. So 10 years ago, 100 million was spent. 10 years later, we're now spending 1.6 billion across the country. And in the most recent Auditor General's report on local government, 220 of the municipalities were using consultants for their financial reports. So in many of these municipalities, they don't have staffing, either posts filled or the posts are filled with persons who don't have the requisite qualifications. The work is then outsourced. And then the concerns have been raised by the Auditor General that often that costly outsourcing results in work and financials which cannot be relied upon. And there's a recurrent trend there. The last bullet points to the fact that 81% of municipalities reappointed consultants used in the previous year. So that's a real concern in terms of, are we paying twice for a service and then still not getting value? This is just a quick snapshot of consultant costs across the provinces. Eastern Cape, spent 137 million in 2020-2021 and upped it to 154 in the following year. And the trend is across provinces there. In the interest of time, I'll move along. This was an investigation by the Auditor General into the use of consultants at the 4 metros. And here we have Buffalo City, Ekurhuleni, Tshwane, and Mangaung spending 142 million on consultants to look at asset management and financials and financial reporting services. And the findings of the AG there were that there were material misstatements at all of those except the city of Ekurhuleni due to late appointment of the consultant or consultants not delivering or lack of records and docs. What can be done? These are some suggestions from the A4A project. Really, we need far greater access to information that would enable strengthen citizen monitoring. So we don't see enough performance-related information on staff performance. We'd encourage greater use of these Auditor General's findings to better engage. And then the Human Rights Commission have recommended that we actually revisit the selection process for mayors and councillors so that we get minimum qualifications there to support greater oversight over municipalities. Ethics training, I heard it earlier from Girish, and that I think is a critical need across municipalities. We need that to be regularized. Strengthening the oversight of National Treasury and COGTA. There's the bill that Jaap touched on, I'm sure, that is overdue in terms of strengthening interventions that come in under Section 139, and then support for PFM reforms. And then, of course, lastly, we'd like to suggest that there's greater adoption of these high-level principles on fiscal transparency, participation, and accountability. Thank you. That's it.
Thank you very much, Jay. I appreciate this pace. Thank you. Thanks for that helpful set of additions from the Action for Accountability team and their experience. That's wonderful. I'm going to move to the third voice from the civil society grantee projects, and that is we're inviting Nontando and Gamla from Ephesus to speak. The Sofokama project, which she's representing, is a new project that's just starting. That's a project which involves a consortium of 4 organizations. The Ephesus Rural Democracy Trust, the Equality Collective, and Governance and Livelihood Agenda. So I'm going to hand over to Nontando to talk from those experiences of that group, largely in non-metro areas of particularly the rural provinces. Nontando, over to you. Nontando, are you there? I'm not seeing Nontando. She might be having connection problems. So I'm going to just check if there are no other questions. I'm just checking if Nontando is there. Okay. I've got a further question. I've got a number of questions from Tess. We've got a question from Chris and a question from Bongiseni, and I'm seeing a new question, a new hand from Sarah. Sarah, would you like to unmute yourself and speak while we see if we can get Nontando up? Are you able to unmute yourself, Sarah?
Yes, I'm here.
Go for it. Do you
Thanks,
want to
Janine.
pose a question? Yeah.
Yeah, pose a question and also engage with one of the comments made in the chat. So thank you to the presentations. They were really interesting, and Yaptifus's provocations, I think, were the right ones. I want to maybe add another one, a question around exactly how we pace reforms and how incrementally or not we kind of introduce them. There's the reforms we need on paper, and then there's when we implement them, they can create new challenges for us. So I was thinking, for example, we have been supportive of more permanency for Section 56 managers with a long-term vision of a more stable administration that's slightly removed from political churn. But of course, we can also lock in managers now who have been introduced by particular factions, perhaps under nepotistic appointment or whatever. And now, say, a new council comes in and then they will struggle potentially with actioning their own programmatic agenda. So there are all these kinds of what are the results of reforms, and communities of practice and scholars and activists like this, I think, can help think through some of those, the nitty-gritty of that. And then the question around professions. I think it's a really interesting question. I just think it depends how those professions are set up. I think if professional associations emerge from the professions itself and those who are concerned about the integrity of their own profession, I think they can potentially grow into something very strong. But if they're set up simply by the state as a policy tool, I think they can fall foul of state patronage and so on. So it'll depend how they emerge and the role they play, I think.
Thank you, Sarah, for those contributions. And for those who haven't noticed, there's a number of questions and conversations going on in the chat. And please feel free, if you've got views in response to any of those, to join the conversation in the chat. I'm going to hand over to Nontando now and invite her to share her thoughts in response to this question about what the new national framework offers for potentially for thinking about local government senior appointments. Nontando.
Thank you, Janine, and my apologies again. Am I audible?
You are. All good.
Oh, thank you so much. Technology has a tendency of failing you at the worst of times. I just want to build from what my colleagues have shared, but in particular from Yap's grounding and framing of the conversation. The framework for me does two things. It deals with the notion of professionalism and deals with it quite separately to the process of professionalization. And it does attempt to move us in new and different ways and in a path towards one, professionalization as a process, but also the recruiting of professionals into the sector. So around professionalism and in dealing with that concept, the framework does give guidance on the caliber of people that must come into public service. So the whole thing about skills, character, values, commitment to public service and excellence, and all of those nice things that it talks about a merit-based system, recruitment system, independent interview panels, and it does also speaks to ensuring that professionals do remain professional in their conduct, right? And it does talk about enhanced framework for consequence management. Where I'm finding, and these are just general observations on the framework, where I'm finding gaps around the concept of professionalism is that the framework fails to recognize and appreciate the role of professional bodies, and we do talk about them, right? That they can play in holding professionals to a high standard of professional conduct. And I think Yap did speak a bit about that and how it can work and how it's worked in the past. And I don't think that the public service and the public sector in particular is always poised to do this level of oversight, right? And ensuring a high standard of professional conduct. And then the framework deals with professionalization. And for me, professionalization is about the people and the institutions, so the systems and the processes for public administration. And it's often difficult to talk about professionalization while looking on only just one side of the coin and not looking at both sides of the coin. On the main, the framework, its emphasis in the conversation around professionalization is on the people. And I think for me, that's the point of departure in recognizing that in the conversation about professionalization, we ought to be talking, yes, about the people and how we bring the right people on the bus and we put them in the right place in the bus, and how we determine where the bus is going, but also about the systems and the processes for public administration. And so obviously in its present form, the framework doesn't do that. In my view, and I mean, Yap has spoken to the legislative framework that regulates recruitments in local government. The framework in its current form shifts very little in local government from a current practice point of view. And I mean, one appreciates that because the framework was not written for local government. And so it's not surprising that there's very little around local government in the framework. Oversight over the executive has always been one of the biggest challenges in municipalities, that and deployment. And in its current form, the framework locates executive authority for recruitment, not appointment, but the processes of recruitment itself. It locates that with municipal councils. It advises that municipal councils can draw members for selection panels from some database somewhere, can draw in provincial treasury. It accommodates deployment, and it proposes an increased term of appointment that moves from a 5-year term of office that's linked to political administration to a 2-term of political administration. So really nothing new, nothing that shifts the needle in any big way, nothing that deals with any of the current challenges, both from a people's point of view and from a systems point of view. And as I land, I do want to draw attention to a research that one of the researchers from Perry had done in a few years back. And this lady had looked at the processes of development of organograms in municipalities. And she had looked at different categories of municipalities across different provinces. And she concluded that many of the municipalities, so the process itself was politicized, should not have been, but was heavily politicized across many municipalities. And she had found that then these municipalities had ended up with organograms that were bloated, that were not fit for purpose. And this is just a systems issue. And so if we're looking at professionalization, it's one thing to get the right people in the bus, but there's also this thing to be said about systems engineering and systems design, organizational culture, the administrative political interface, oversight, all of those things that are institutional in nature, which must and should form a core and an integral part of conversations on professionalization. Thank you.
Thank you, Nontando. Thanks for the really helpful input, particularly around that challenge of professionalism and for overcoming the tech challenge. Thank you very much. I'm going to ask if there's anybody from the floor who wants to ask a question or raise a point that hasn't been written already in the chat. The presenters and Jaap can see the questions in the chat. If there's anyone else with a new comment or question, please raise a hand now. Otherwise, I'm going to invite any of the presenters, if there's anything that they want to respond to. I see Jonathan Erasmus's the most recent question around the transparency of performance scorecards is one that anybody might want to tackle if you know the answer to that. And then there's Mbogiseni's kind of grand question about whether having a single public service might help address some of these issues at a local government level. So I'm offering the opportunity to any of the panel, and then I'm going to hand to Jaap de Visser to make some closing remarks. So you are safe, Jaap, but if there's anybody else from the panel who wants to respond briefly to any of the questions raised by Tess, Chris, Mbongiseni, or Jonathan, please feel free to leap in. Anyone? Jay, are you?
Thanks, Janine. Just very briefly in response to Mbongiseni's question, it's surfaced over the years efforts to try and create a single public service, and there's been pushback and often quite heated discussions and debate around it. And I don't see it happening anytime soon, despite I think good reasons for us to move in that direction. There's not enough consensus. There are sectors and groups and pushback, and in my view, many municipalities are captured at a local level by private interests, and there would be significant pushback in an effort to retain power and control. So I think it's going to be kicked down the road further.
Thank you very much, Jay. In the absence of other, Nontando, you wanted to add something in response to one of the questions. Go for it.